right, welcome everyone to the third episode of Sam Gets Schooled, the weekly podcast show where we take a peek inside a new topic every single week with a so-called self-pronounced expert. This week our expert is Nickolay, who has chosen about 15 minutes ago the topic to be gliding. Hi Nickolay.
Hey, yeah.
So when you first announced the topic, I asked you whether or not you meant gliding as in the kind of the physics behind what gliding is as a concept or the sport, and you just kind of said both, right?
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah. And so what's gliding to you? Why on earth did you choose this as a topic in the first place?
Well, it's something that I picked up quite recently, actually. Something that I always wanted to do, and not really had the opportunity to do it. And now I've done about an hour and a half's worth of gliding in the air. So I'm quite at the beginning, but being aerospace engineer and being a PhD student in sort of aircraft design, I know my way around airplanes, and so it's an interesting thing to do.
You drop in some big names there.
Yeah, I know.
So you said that you've done about an hour and a half's worth of gliding. How many trips do you do that over? Because from what I understand, the better the glider and the better the pilot. I mean, like you could do an hour and a half in one go.
Yeah. So it's all about the weather, really. So you have different types of launches to get you up in the air. So for people, for the most basic terms, is the glider hasn't got an engine, and at least that's the...
Yeah. Maybe start by describing like what a glider is.
Yeah, so a glider is an aircraft designed to fly without an engine, which is quite disconcerting to get into a tin box, strap yourself in, and to find that you have no power to get you up there. But the thing is perfectly designed to fly without an engine, and there are several ways to get yourself up into the air. There's you can get yourself an aero tow, which is another plane to tow you up, or the other most popular way is a winch. So there's a cable at the end of the runway, and that really pulls you in, and it gets you up.
Yeah. I also think you can do like a bungee one as well, which is like
the bungees. I've heard they're a little bit more exciting because you kind of align yourself at the top of a hill.
Yeah.
You accelerate yourself and kind of hope that there's some lift at the end to pick you up and when you jump off the hill, but those are not as popular as the other two.
Yeah. So I guess my first question is, I mean, as you said, you're interested in planes. It's part of your profession, but why on earth as a hobby would you be interested in gliding rather than just flying planes? I mean, what comes from not having an engine? Why is that better?
So the biggest, for me personally, the biggest, the most important thing is the silence that you get. So when you have a big engine at the front, there's a lot of noise, a lot of vibrations. When you're up there in a glider, it's completely silent. You have a completely 360-degree view of everything around you. Depending on the glider, it's silent. You can see the birds soaring. And the feeling is complete, like is quite different to being in a powered aircraft. And in a way, it is a bit of a skill to actually do the gliding. So it's a different skill to flying, even though they're similar.
Yeah, because I've done a little bit of gliding myself, but I only ever did it once.
Yeah.
And it was with like a powered glider. So obviously that sounds like it's cheating, but it just had like a little engine, which you use to gain altitude. And then the idea is that then you set that to idle or to turn off whilst you're in the air. But I do know what you mean, although I disagree that it's entirely silent because because there's no engine and there's no vibration. Instead, all you hear is like the creaking of the glider as it kind of like bends in the air.
Yeah. What kind of an engine did you have on there?
Oh, I don't know. This was years and years ago. It was tiny, whatever it was.
But yeah, okay. That's a fair point. You do get that. But I still think it's better than having the engine at the front. It's not a completely dead silence, but it's as close as you will get.
Is it more dangerous?
Well, so I don't know the statistics, but you do get a parachute.
Right.
So,
is that a good or a bad sign?
Well, I don't know. I think the parachute is there more for your peace of mind rather than for you to actually use it. But gliders tend to fly quite close to each other, so that's one of the reasons why you have the parachute.
Right. Okay. So you do gliding as a hobby, right?
Yeah.
And how many? I mean, you said you did an hour and a half, but how many times have you been gliding?
So I've done 4. So I've done 1 aero tow and 4 launches, winch launches.
Yeah, and you this is presumably with someone else.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But on the one on Wednesday, so that was the very last one, I was incredibly lucky to stay up there for almost an hour.
Oh, nice.
On a gliding, yeah. So it's a lot of luck. It's a lot of skill as well with the person, especially behind me. Not my skill, but the pilot in there to actually feel where the thermal currents are and hit them spot on so that they lift you up.
Yeah, so maybe that's something we should talk about next, is about why it's a skill and why, because gliding's a sport as well. Like most difficult things, people eventually start getting competitive about it. So, Pete, you'd imagine, I read, so a little bit of like physics and maths behind it is that depending on your type of glider, you measure how good technically a glider is by its glide ratio, right? So that's the number of meters it goes forward for every meter it falls through the air. And kind of the best gliders might have like a glide ratio of 70-1. Is that right?
Yeah, those are the high end ones.
What's more realistic?
More realistic so the ones that you find in a general club are about 30-40. You wouldn't get
like half.
Half, yeah. The 70s are those are very competition. Long range flying.
So like they're like the F1 of the gliding world.
Basically, yeah. Those are hugely expensive things, and most clubs can't afford them.
Yeah, I bet. So once you're in the air, you have to. The aim of the game really is to try and stay in the air for as long as possible, right?
Yeah. So that's basically it. Every club will have a record during the day, and everyone wants to beat that record. So the skill is the launch. So that's what you get. So with a winch launch, you would normally get about 1,700, depending on the glider. Lighter gliders will go much higher than heavier ones. Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of skill in trying to get the most height out the winch?
Yes. So the launch is the skill is actually not in the pilot, but the winch driver. That's where the skill comes in.
Oh, right. Surely it's not very hard to drive a winch.
Well, you'd be surprised because you're not. If it's a windy day, you can actually drive the winch backwards and use the glider as a kite to gain altitude.
I see. Because you want to take off into the wind, probably, just like when you launch a kite.
Exactly, yeah. So if you have sufficient wind, you're not necessarily pulling the glider, you're kind of extending it so that it gains height as much as possible.
Okay, right, okay. So once you're in the air, you've disattached from your cable or whatever that is.
Yeah.
As a pilot, if you're a good one, what do you start looking for? Like, what are the different ways of gaining altitude?
Well, so pretty much the only way of doing it is thermal.
Okay.
Finding a thermal current, and things that you look for are patches of sunlight. So if you have a cloudy sky and there's one patch of sunlight somewhere, you head in that direction. Birds are a very good indication, because you'd be surprised how many birds fly at 2,000, 3,000 feet. They're not
really?
They're not hunting for prey up there because you can't see anything. I think they're just up there having fun, really.
Right. Okay.
So
you need to follow the birds.
Follow the birds and smoke, fires, things like that. You'd be surprised how much lift you'd get out of even a small fire, because as I've been told, you usually have warmer air around the bottom and colder air at the top.
Yeah.
And it takes just a little bit to break that air, to break a pocket of air to get a stream of warmer air flowing upwards and then outwards, a bit like a donut.
Right. So if a farmer is having like a bonfire, which they often do, that can actually lift like an entire glider, even if it's like several hundred feet in the air.
Not only one, you can lift several. So what you usually find is, against why you have a parachute, is when one person finds a thermal, a lot of gliders will join in and circle around to get as much lift as possible. And it is a very strange feeling to actually hit one of those things.
Is it quite physical? Can you feel it happening?
Yeah, you can feel it. You can. So when you're in it, so usually because it's quite a small pocket of air, you have to put the glider in a banking turn, and it's fighting you on the turn. So it's trying to tip you back into
I see,
into level flight, and so you have to fight it, keep the turn in, and you can just see the altimeter going, slowly 1,800, 1,900, 2,000. And it's quite a strange feeling to be gaining something out of nothing. But it's exhilarating.
Sure, because I don't want to show you up, but I think there are other ways of gaining altitude as well, especially if you're in a particularly mountainous area.
Oh yeah, updraft, and you can do that as well. However, I'm not an expert on that.
No. But just in concept, I think it's to do with when this is responsible for a lot of weather that you see on mountains and things as well, in that when air, just wind in general, comes along and like hits the side of a mountain, it's forced upwards, and you can essentially ride that as well.
Yeah, soaring.
Okay, so that has a name.
Slope soaring. So that's what it is. Slope soaring.
Okay, I don't know whether you've heard of this as well, but there's, I can't remember it now. I read it on the Wikipedia. Maybe you could look it up. But in the Wikipedia article, when air hits a mountain like that, you can not only ride that initial wave, but it also causes waves in the air kind of behind the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like you force the wave up, and that makes the first wave. And then just like if you shook a piece of string or something, that wave like continues through the air, like propagates through the atmosphere, and you can ride that like quite far distance.
Yeah, those are quite dangerous though, because I've heard that you can get into the difficulties where you can't get back down.
Really?
Yeah, so they can be quite powerful if you're... especially if you have a high performance glider and that catches you, they can be quite big in terms of area, and that can launch you up if you're unprepared.
I see. So is that a real risk? I never thought that would actually be a problem a glider would have.
Yeah, I've heard of this, but again, in the shallow areas of Hampshire, you wouldn't get much of that as a problem.
It's just kind of, I guess if you're a pro, you go to kind of more extreme areas where you get even bigger updrafts from one reason or another, and that could cause these problems if you are riding in something which is quite high performance.
Yeah, well, on that day where we're getting the 55, the almost 1 hour flight, we're having difficulties getting back down, so we kept hitting thermal after thermal after thermal. On the way back down. By accident, yeah. So the only way to get back down was to put the spoilers up.
I was going to say, because surely there's lots of ways to slow an aircraft down enough. You can just kind of slip the aircraft, which is where you turn it kind of on its side and slip through the air, or you can like dive, or you can put up those kind of, they're not called wing fences. You call them spoilers or something.
Spoilers, exactly. Yeah.
Can you describe what they are?
So they are essentially flat plates that come out either from the bottom or from the top of the wing, or from both sides of the wing. Yeah. And essentially that disturbs the airflow going over the the wings and kills the lift. And so you kind of tend to go from a glide ratio. So this is the efficiency that you were talking about, the glider. You basically reduce that efficiency massively.
Right. Okay. And is that there just as like for this reason, just in case?
That and landing as well. So this is where when you want to lose altitude and landing and control the descent.
Yeah, because I seem to remember using those on the one experience when I went gliding, and it's like a really sudden change. Like they come out of, I mean, they can extend quite far out the wings, but as soon as you move them up even a little bit, like you really start feeling the drop.
Yeah, you can hear it as well. So you can hear it, hear the basically the wind break that this causes.
Yeah.
And the disturbance in the airflow that causes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're an aeronautical engineer.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be a shame if we didn't discuss more of the technical side of gliding.
Yeah.
And I guess a good place to talk about that is what separates a good glider from a bad glider, because we talked about that a little bit earlier.
So gliding, much like airplanes, big motor airplanes, you really have two things to consider. The weight is one of them, and the other one is the aerodynamics. And the weight isn't as important generally in gliders as it is the aerodynamics, because you can get away with having a little bit of a weight penalty. So this is why in gliders you would find the wings being the critical part of the glider. They're the bit which is really more important. And so if we start looking at the wings, the thing that you want to reduce is drag, wing drag. So the thing that reduces your performance. So
drag is the force which acts on pretty much all parts of the aircraft, but it tries to push you backwards.
Correct. Yeah. So when you talk about an efficiency of 70, what that really is saying is a lift to drag ratio of 70.
Right.
So for every 70 meters forward that you go, you lose a meter. That is kind of the drag on the aircraft is 70 times weaker than the lift. And the way you minimize that is there are several components of drag, and that is a whole field in itself. But the two most important ones are lift-induced drag and friction drag. So
people will be most familiar with like friction-induced drag, which is the same kind of friction that you see on anything.
Yeah. So the friction is really to do with the air, and that again it gets really complicated really quickly, but you can control it with the profile. So the friction bit is really the profile of the wing is very important when you look at it sideways. That's how you control the friction. And the other bit, the lift-induced drag, is really to do with the 3D geometry of the wing. And the easiest way to do it is to make the wing very thin and slender, long, thin, and slender.
Yeah, because I think if you were to look at a plane, like a normal airplane, light aircraft, and a glider side by side, probably the first thing you'd notice is just like how massive the glider's wings are.
Yeah, so that's what they're trying to do with that, is reduce the lift-induced drag with that geometry. But that comes at a price. So, for example, when you make the wings that big, you lose maneuverability. That's why when you have acrobatic gliders, their wings are a lot shorter.
Right. So even within gliding, you have acrobatic flyers.
Yes, you can. You can do everything that you can do in a powered aircraft in a glider. Almost everything, actually.
Right. But so are there separate competitions held for that? Because it sounds like the aim would be very different in an acrobatic glider.
Of course, yeah, of course. Completely different aircraft in terms of what it's optimized for. Again, I think they're specifically looking at maneuverability. But the competitions I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, but you can imagine. I can imagine that being quite a difficult style of flying to master, because unlike powered flight, if you have a limited amount, I mean, you have a limited amount of resource, right? And your resource is essentially height, that's kind of your power. Unlike a normal aircraft, where part of the engine's thrust goes into generating the lift you need to stay up. With a glider, it's the gravitational force pulling you down, which through the wings generates the lift. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. But yeah, that makes sense.
It's like when you're flying a kite, right? And there's not quite enough wind to like keep it up. What you can do is you can like tug down on the string over and over again, right? And as you pull it down, that generates lift to pull it back up.
Yeah, that's it.
It's the same. It's the same kind of idea in that a component. I don't want to get too technical because it's an audio show and no one can see my hands. But a component of your weight is kind of pulling you both forwards and up. That doesn't really make sense, but that's kind of what happens.
Your height is basically your energy. So
exactly, yeah.
As you lose height, you lose energy, and you have one shot at landing.
That's very right. So a crash landings in gliding particularly common because there's not much you can do about it if things aren't looking good.
Experienced pilots wouldn't really crash land, especially if you have enough of a runway. One of the benefits that gliders have with those big wings, relatively big wings, is that their landing speeds are quite low. Yeah. So it's not as much as a problem. You tend to mitigate that with the lower landing speed.
Yeah. Is the landing technique very similar? Because I know in normal air, like anyone who's taken any kind of commercial flight, they'll know that as you approach the runway, you do something called flaring, which is where you tip the nose up, and that exposes a lot of the underside of the surface of the wing to the air that's coming from the front of you, and that helps slow you down and also generates a lot of lift to kind of set you down very gently. Do you do the same thing in a glider?
Exactly the same. The only difference I would say is you tend to land with your spoilers in a glider.
Yeah.
But it's exactly the same as powered aircraft.
Okay, but do they have, because they're kind of bullet shaped, aren't they? The cockpits, they're quite small. So surely that limits the amount of space you have for landing gear. So do you try and land flat like a belly flop?
Yeah. Well, again, it's
am I right? I'm an expert at this already.
It's not strange. It's strange because the glider tends to have its landing gear along the fuselage. So it would have its wheels or its skid along the fuselage. So as it slows down, as it comes to a stop, it would kind of tip over on one of the two wings.
Oh, I see.
So that is the process. Unlike an aircraft, which would happily sit on the runway on its tricycle gear and sit there, whereas the glider would really tip over and then wait there to be picked up by somebody.
Yeah. So do you know any facts about gliding? Because what do you know, what the longest glide flight is or something like that?
I can tell you how much you can. In order to get a license, to get one of the bronze licenses, you need to do about 5 hours of gliding. In fact,
is that all?
Above 5 hours of gliding in one go.
Oh, I see. In one go, so not cumulative.
No, so you need to be in the air for 5 hours. So that's the bronze. One of the bronze challenges. You need to be in the air for above 5 hours.
Is that hard to do? Like, how many people would have that in like a normal club or something?
Oh, most people would be bronze. I think most people in the club are quite keen.
Right.
And because it's so cheap in comparison to powered aircraft.
Yeah, well, you don't have to pay for fuel, do you?
Yeah, so because the fuel maintenance costs are much lower, you would tend a lot more people would get a lot more flying done in terms of gliding.
I see. So they're relatively more experienced and well practiced. And like you were saying, it's somewhat luck based with the weather. So if you fly more often, then you're more likely to strike it lucky.
Yeah.
So if bronze is 5 hours, do you know what's higher than that?
I think that's the limit. There are other challenges which are to do with cumulative distance. Cumulative height.
Right.
I think that's 3,000 feet. And also there are cross-country challenges that you have to complete as well.
So when you say cumulative height, do you mean like total amount of height gained during the flight?
Yes. So you would start off at one height, and you would increase, and that would accumulate until you reach your target.
Right, I see. Okay, so even if you drop back down again, that still counts.
Yeah, it does count. But most people would drop back down and then gain height again, and drop back down and gain height.
Yeah. What's the risk of going too high in a glider? Because we were saying about that before.
So the first risk is visibility. If you're in a cloud base, you really don't want to be in a cloud, mainly because you don't know where you're going, and someone else could be in a cloud as well.
Yeah.
That's the main bit, and you lose you can use your orientation very quickly.
Yeah, because you can't see any landmarks.
Landmarks, and you can also lose your orientation in terms of the three axes. So what I mean is it's quite easy to think that the aircraft is flying straight and level, and you're actually pitched on the side, diving straight towards the ground.
Right. Okay.
So that's the other difficulty.
So you shouldn't fly in clouds.
You shouldn't. That's not a clever thing to do in a glider. As you go further up, obviously your the oxygen, the air pressure decreases, and you risk, again, you wouldn't really want to go any higher than 9,000 feet without a oxygen supply.
That's pretty high though, isn't it? 9,000 feet.
Yeah. So 3,000 meters. So.
Right. Okay. So that's but 3 kilometers high.
3 kilometers high. Yeah.
Okay, but people do fly that high.
Yeah, people do. People have gone up to 10, 11 kilometers with an oxygen supply, obviously.
Are you joking?
Yeah, they've gone even higher than that. Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But surely, as you get higher, air pressure decreases, and that reduces the efficiency of your glider.
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. That means you fall faster. But if you get one of those thermals that you get off the side of mountains, those can launch you up very quickly.
Oh, I see. So I have a friend, for example, who is really into kayaking, and he likes to talk about the weather a lot because that influences rainfall, and weather patterns essentially influences when and where he should kayak and how much fun it's going to be. Yeah. Within gliding groups of people, do you essentially just talk about the weather all the time?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's it's a discussion about the weather and who's got the longest time.
Right, okay.
In a glider.
So if you're going to join a gliding club, expect those two things.
Yeah, expect a lot of standing around and a lot of flying.
All right, but that doesn't sound too bad.
Yeah, those two things. Expect. Yeah, it's a good thing. It's a good hobby to have. It's the cheapest way to learn how to fly, as well.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, folks.
Yeah.
Nickolay, I might not have mentioned this part of the show to you beforehand, which puts you on the spot slightly. But normally I ask my guests to choose a song or tune of some kind, which I put at the end of the podcast. If you had listened to any of my podcasts beforehand, you would already know this. So maybe this is a side of friendship or not. Do you know of any songs that you might like to go at the end of your podcast?
I do. How silly am I allowed to go?
It's entirely your choice.
Can I have Barbie Girl by Aqua, please?
Yes. You can absolutely have Barbie Girl by Aqua, but if I get a legal request from whoever actually owns that song, I'm gonna redirect them to you, okay?
Go for it.
Right, okay. Thanks very much to you, Nickolay, for coming on the show for our third episode. If anyone wants to know more about gliding, I'll put a few links down in the description which Nickolay can provide. Thanks for listening, and goodbye. Thanks very much for tuning in again, and thanks very much for Nickolay for coming on the show. You may have noticed this is not Barbie Girl by Aqua, but if you do want to listen to that tune, you can find the link in the description. I hope you join us next week where we have a very special guest indeed. Thanks a lot, and bye-bye.